So, on December 6th, 2025, a really popular nightclub in Goa, it became the scene of an absolutely horrific tragedy. And this wasn't just some random fire. It was a disaster that probably never should have happened, fueled by just sheer negligence. We're going to break down what went so terribly wrong at the Birch nightclub, who paid the ultimate price, and what's happening now to find some accountability.
25. This is the number at the very heart of this story. And it's so much more than just a statistic, right? It represents 25 individual people, 25 lives that were just tragically cut short that night.
So, who were these 25 people? Well, when you start to look at who the victims were, it reveals a story that goes way beyond the walls of that nightclub.
Okay, so when you break down who the victims were, it's really telling. A staggering 80%, that's 20 of the 25 people who died, were actually staff members. Only 5 were tourists, so this wasn't just a tragedy for the club's patrons. It was a devastating blow to the very people who kept the place running. And, a lot of them were a long, long way from home. And that's the thing. The majority of the staff who died were migrant workers. They'd come from places like Nepal and from other states all across India. All of them just looking for a better way to make a living in Goa's busy tourist scene. And now, their loss is being felt in villages and towns hundreds, even thousands of miles away. So the big question is, how did a night that was supposed to be a celebration turn into such a catastrophe? When you look at the timeline, you see this deadly chain reaction where literally every single second mattered. It all unfolded so fast, in just a matter of minutes. At 11:45 p.m., some electrical firecrackers, they sparked a blaze right on the crowded dance floor. Because it was so overcrowded, the fire just spread like crazy. Then, a short time later, a gas cylinder in the kitchen exploded, which just turned the whole thing into an inferno. It wasn't until 12:04 a.m. that emergency services were even called, and by the time they got there, their response was held up because of poor access to the club's remote location. You can really see it as this deadly chain reaction. It started with just a spark from those firecrackers. Then it was fed by the overcrowding and the awful ventilation. The gas cylinder explosion, that was like a massive accelerant. And finally, the whole place just filled with this toxic smoke, trapping everyone inside with absolutely no way out. And here's a really crucial detail. The fire itself wasn't what killed most people. For 22 of the 25 victims, the official cause of death was asphyxiation. They were overcome by toxic smoke while they were desperately trying to find an escape. Many of them ended up trapped in the basement and the kitchen. And this account from a survivor, it just paints a horrifying picture of the chaos inside. Bodies were found stacked together, thick smoke preventing evacuation. It just shows you the sheer panic, the impossible conditions these people were facing. There was simply nowhere to go. And all of this leads to the most difficult question of all. Could this have been prevented? All the evidence suggests this wasn't just some tragic accident. It was a catastrophe that was almost inevitable because of a whole cascade of failures. I mean, look at this. The contrast between what was legally required and what was actually happening it's stark. The club had no emergency exits on its ground floor. None. It was operating without a fire safety certificate, the NOC, which is a mandatory government approval. It had illegal structures that everyone knew about, and official warnings about all these dangers. They were just completely ignored for a whole month before the fire. And it's like each failure just made the next one worse. The place was critically overcrowded, so of course the fire spread faster. The club was in a remote location, which meant help was slow to arrive. Fire trucks had to park 400 meters away. And all this happened after clear official warnings about the illegal structures were just ignored. It was a complete and total cascade of systemic negligence. So, in the wake of such a preventable loss of life, the focus immediately shifted to accountability. Who is responsible for this and what happens now? Okay, so the official response has been swift. In FIR, that's a formal police complaint, was filed against the club owners for negligence. 5 senior staff members and managers have been taken into custody. 3 government officials have already been suspended, and now a high-level inquiry is underway, and they've been tasked with delivering a report very quickly. The political response has been pretty significant, as you'd expect. The Goa government has promised stringent action and announced aid. The Prime Minister's office expressed condolences and announced some financial support for the victims' families. On the other side, opposition parties are calling this an administrative failure and blaming corruption. And meanwhile, state governments, like Uttarakhand, are stepping in to provide extra support for the victims from their regions.
Beyond the immediate investigation, this tragedy has shaken Goa's entire tourism industry to its core. There are now these widespread calls for a full fire safety audit of every single nightlife venue in the state. People are demanding much, much stricter rules to make sure something like this can never, ever happen again. And that really leaves us with this final, very sobering question. This wasn't just a fire. It was the end result of a whole series of choices where safety was just repeatedly ignored. It forces all of us to ask, when safety is ignored for profit, what is the true price of a night out?